Okay, welcome back, and we restart by entering in the fourth century. We already talk of many changes in the Roman Empire, although some of the structures still existed, such as, for instance, the Senate or the title as a consul or some magistracies as aediles, questor, praetor that we already met through the Roman Empire up to this period of time between the end of the third century, beginning of the fourth century AD. And what we are now are going to review is this emperor that we already met, and is the emperor Diocletian. We already say many things about Diocletian. This is just a review, and he became emperor in 285. He tried to reorganize the empire that was under through a huge crisis, political, social, religious, military, and mainly economical. We already said how some of the provinces, as Italy and Greece, impoverished under that crisis of the second half of the third century AD. So he is the one that, by reorganizing the empire, introduced the four rulers, so known as the Thetrarchy, and even to resolve the problem of the economical, the commercial problem. He fixed prices for the goods through the Roman Empire, reorganized the tax system, even the coinage system, and we remember him at least by crossing even the Christian history in this period of time, because Christianity grew tremendously, especially in the second century AD. His persecution against Christians, with the four laws issued between the beginning of the 303 and the beginning of the 304. And then he came to the 305, that as he established the bicennials, the 20 years of authority as an emperor, he resigned and he passed his authority on to his Caesar. And so here is what we see about the provinces in Italy and this organization. We see or remember the very troublesome border between the Rhine, the North Rhine, and the Danube River. Then the Dacia was conquered under Trajan, the Emperor Trajan. And so we have this other part of the provinces in the northwest of the Roman Empire, Britannia, Gallia, and Hispania. Then another province that were very still flourishing in that period of time was North Africa, and it was flourishing not just because it was the storehouse of grain and other crops, good for the Roman Empire, for food supply in the Roman Empire, but even culturally and even spiritually. Let's remember that many of the so-called fathers of the church, especially those from the Latin culture, were coming from North Africa. And then we have Egypt, and then the Asia, that became very, very influential in the Roman Empire under the Severi emperors, and then Illyricum, that we know today as the Balkanian area. Among all of those provinces, Italy, where the Roman Empire started, was the most impoverished province in the whole Roman Empire. And this does not mean that in Italy we did not find anymore the Senate, the buildings in Rome, but the decline was quite evident. And in this situation, about the tetrarchy that we talk about, we learned that the empire was divided in two sides: the West, Latin-based culture, and the East, Greek-based culture. So this new Roman world, with impoverishment of Italy and Greece also, there were the two lighthouses of the early empire, as we compare now with the late empire. Uh, uh, in spite of this new situation, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain are the new commercial hubs in this period of time between the end of the third and the beginning of the fourth century. A huge development of Romanized cities that grew up all through the Roman Empire, cities that start even to have their own senate, made of veterans, made up of the wealthier representatives of those cities, and so made of basically by the locals from those provinces. And was a new shape of the Roman Empire, even with new buildings, with new cities that were growing in that period of time. And we still have some of them today, like in north of Italy, Milan, or Paris in Gallia, or even London in Great Britain, that have some Roman roots but grew in this period of time. And as we already learned, this Roman Empire that didn't expand more than what we see in the map today, um, most of the people in the Roman Empire got the Roman citizenship. And was not because of the benevolence of Caracalla, but remember, it was mostly because of taxes, to get money. And where to get money? Basically from the people that had that money. So from the wealthy family of the provinces, from the artisans, from the guilds, or workers. And because of this new tax system, um, basically all those categories became hereditary, so from father to son. And this was to guarantee that the same families were able to pay taxes to the Roman Empire. And another new thing that we strongly hardly see in this Roman Empire was the cultural and geographical division between East and West that we already talked a lot. But what was really affecting the situation of this Roman Empire was the crisis of the army. The soldiers were not anymore Italians. Since Vespasian and then the emperors of the second century AD, they were hired from the provinces. And even with Septimius Severus, the Praetorian Guards, the body soldiers guarding the life of the emperor, were not anymore taken from Italy, not from anymore the Italians, but were taken from people, from soldiers of the provinces. And so even this issue affected the decline of Italy, that was uh, the main bone of the Roman Empire. So what happened to those soldiers? As you remember, we already say that they start to root and develop their own duty in the same region where they were hired. So they get married, they have children, they grew their own family and took care of their own family, and even their duty as soldiers. And this affected the discipline, the training, and even the will to move around the Roman Empire for war purposes. So, in one sense, let me say that the Roman soldiers of this time became lazy employees. But this third century really was a new period of peace. Like in the first century, as we remember the Augustan Pax, the peace in the period of time of the Emperor Augustus, especially at the very beginning of the first century AD. And even now, at the beginning of the fourth century and through the second half of the third century, there was a flourishing of culture, intellectual life, and even religion. What about religion? Many of the Eastern cults were spread because of the soldiers, because of the merchants, because of the commercial trade, especially from the East, through the whole Roman Empire. In Rome, the cult of Isis, of Serapis from Egypt, was one of the main Eastern cults. But even the mother Cybele, the goddess of fertility, and also very most important was from Persia, the Mithraism cults that we already talked, because already in the second century these cults start to spread out. But I want just to talk about one cult that became very, very important under the Syrian emperors. If you remember Elagabalus, that was even before becoming an emperor, he was a priest, a young high priest of the sun god, the Sol Invictus from Syria, and he wanted to establish that religion in Rome, along with another Eastern religion that was Christianity. But we want to talk apart of Christianity, but also philosophy. Stoicism, Epicureanism. We already met this philosophy, especially at the end of the first century BC, beginning of the first century AD, with those writers like such as Virgil, Horatius, Catullus, and so on. But in this period of time, between the third and the fourth century, the beginning of the fourth century, Neoplatonism became one of the main philosophies affecting the intellectual life. And what was Neoplatonism? Neo means new, so a renewal, new proposal of an ancient philosophy that was based on the philosophy of Plato, that mainly was valuing the great ideas. Reality is the outcome of the main ideas that are outside of the realities itself. And as this kind of philosophy even was a kind of religion, especially in the elites on the high class of society, was a spirit